Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your number one source for the latest in WWE news and straightforward analysis. Are you ready to get this thing going?
Give me a hell yeah! I said give me a hell yeah!
Then let's get this show started right now.
What's going on, guys and girls? Welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown review right here on the WWE Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Michael Ritter. You can find me on Twitter at Michael5Ritter and on Instagram at MichaelRitter5. And today we're going to be talking about the SmackDown that aired on March 5th, 2021. And I'm actually coming to you much later than what I normally do. Normally I do these shows around 11 or 10:30. Give or take, just usually depends on when I start SmackDown. I didn't start SmackDown until about 11:30 tonight, so big difference from what I normally do. So it's currently 2:20 a.m. right now, so that is definitely a little bit later. But hey, no problem here. I don't really view this as a job or something that I have to do. It's something that I get to do. So I look forward to talking wrestling with you guys, whatever hour of the night. I know that you guys are going to get this. So I just hope that I don't completely butcher words throughout this thing and make it completely obvious that I am tired and it is very late. So I'm going to do my best to give you guys the episode that you deserve and make sure that you guys are satisfied by the end of this. So I hope all is well wherever you are. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for choosing this podcast. It definitely is much appreciated on this end. If you're a regular listener, thank you for making this part of your weekly routine, and I hope you will continue to do so after this episode. Speaking of this episode, at the very end of it, I'm going to have another top 5 like I promised, and I actually hyped this one up a little bit at the end of last week's episode because I actually do think that this is going to be a pretty good top 5. It's a little more creative than just your regular top 5 that I dish out. This one is actually the top 5 Mount Rushmores, and I will explain that a little bit more, obviously, whenever the time comes, and I will certainly get to that after the SmackDown review is concluded. So, without anything else in the way here, I think I am good to go ahead and dive in here to the SmackDown review. And SmackDown starts a little bit different than normal, this time with Michael Cole in the ring, and he's joined by Daniel Bryan. And Cole asked Daniel Bryan why he denied a possible main event at Fastlane, which apparently that main event would have been a tag team match featuring Edge and Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. And right here, Daniel Bryan actually cuts a pretty passionate promo. It was pretty lengthy. He does stumble over his words just a little bit a couple times, but, like I said, it was a pretty long promo. And though some of it seemed a little bit scripted, it was still, pretty fresh off the top of his head. So kudos to him for being able to do it in the first place. And like I said, it was a pretty passionate one. So if you didn't get to watch that, I would definitely recommend going to do that. But Daniel Bryan says that he was never asked to be in that match, so he doesn't know what the hell Cole was talking about. He wasn't ever asked, so he couldn't have possibly have said no. He also adds that he's aware of the dream match that's awaiting at WrestleMania between Edge and Roman Reigns, Attitude Era versus Thunderdome. Everyone wants to see it, right? Well, everyone except one person, that person being Daniel Bryan. And he's going to do everything he can to upset Roman Reigns at Fastlane. That is, of course, if he beats Jey Uso to get the number one contender match at Fastlane for the Universal Championship. And Daniel Bryan says that whenever Edge speared Roman at Elimination Chamber and pointed to the WrestleMania sign, he never felt like more of a failure. He acknowledges that he's focused on becoming more of a full-time dad instead of a full-time wrestler. So he's admittedly put himself on the back burner, but he says by doing that, consequently, he's doing himself a disservice because he knows what he can be. And he goes on to explain how this might be his last chance to main event WrestleMania, and the only way he can do that is to beat Roman Reigns at Fastlane. But he's interrupted by Roman Reigns before he can really go any further, and Roman Reigns comes out to cut another pretty good promo. I will say Roman Reigns has gotten so much better on the mic. I know I've said that before on past episodes, but it really is pretty crazy, just the night and day difference that he had. I mean, I don't know what happened at some point whenever he was gone. Before he came back to do his heel turn, something just clicked in his head. I don't know what it was, who he was working with, but he definitely got that part of his game just completely fixed, and now it almost makes him just a complete wrestler. So, because that was his biggest weak spot. Obviously, there's still things he could possibly get better, but I mean, you're just nitpicking at that point because this dude is absolutely everything he's hyped up to be at this point in his career. But Roman Reigns comes out, and like I said, cuts a damn good promo. But he calls Daniel Bryan the little guy, a lottery winner. He says that he's the type of guy that waits for an opportunity, and every now and then it works out for him. And Jey Uso, of course, does his usual pacing behind Roman Reigns, eventually picking up a mic and basically tells Daniel Bryan that in their match tonight, he's going to put him down whenever they're locked inside the steel cage. And when he's finished talking, he aggressively puts the mic in Daniel Bryan's chest, like nearly shoving him back. And as he's continuing to pace around, he attempts a sneak attack on Daniel Bryan, or at least that's what it looked like he was trying to do, but that does not work out at all. Daniel Bryan kind of throws him down and then eventually throws him out of the ring. And that's pretty much all we get from that opening segment. Just kind of gives you a little bit of your dose of Roman Reigns, your weekly dose of Jey Uso pacing around the ring to attack somebody to say you got to go through me. Although he didn't say that, I mean that's pretty much what he was getting at, and we don't really get much more from them obviously in that segment. But no worries, we do get more of each of those guys as the night goes on. And moving on here, up next we get what was originally supposed to be a tag team match between the Street Profits and Sami Zayn and Baron Corbin. But it eventually turns into two singles matches featuring, each guy from the team. You know what I'm talking about. But how this one starts, Zayn comes out with a microphone and reminds the Street Profits that their win last week was a fluke. And Corbin quickly comes out to reassure everyone that he's not in a tag team. No matter what Sami Zayn or anybody says, he's a singles wrestler, and he challenges either member of the Street Profits to a singles match. So, the originally booked tag team match is changed to a one-on-one contest between Corbin and Montez Ford first. And I thought in this one Montez Ford really put his athletic skill set on display. And he shows a little bit of a preview, a sneak peek, maybe a little bit of a free sample, if you will, of what he's capable of in a possible future singles role. But unfortunately, this match doesn't last very long at all. Ford gets distracted by Sami Zayn outside of the ring, and Corbin makes him pay with an end of days, which is arguably the most protected move in the WWE. Somebody mentioned that, and I couldn't help but notice it myself. I cannot remember many times anybody is kicked out of that move, so just something to kind of pay attention to. And if the move is so, dominant and protected, it really makes you wonder why Baron Corbin has not had more success here in the WWE. But immediately after Baron Corbin does get this win, he ends up getting in an argument with Sami Zayn outside of the ring for whatever reason, even though Sami Zayn helped him to win the match just now. But next we get Sami Zayn and Angelo Dawkins. But Corbin actually leaves Sami to fight by himself, despite, like I said, Sami staying out there to help, and actually contributed to Corbin getting the win by distracting Montez Ford. But Dawkins and Zayn have a little bit of a longer match than the first match. Sami looks to hold his own against a bigger opponent for a majority of the match until Dawkins really gets going and takes control with a couple near pinfalls. Sami hits him with an exploder in the corner of the ring into the turnbuckle, and he looks to actually regain control of the match, but Ford returns the favor by interacting with his documentary crew outside of the ring and ultimately distracting Sami Zayn, giving Angelo Dawkins the perfect opportunity to get the roll-up victory, giving each tag team an individual singles win apiece. And after the match is over, Sami is pretty furious with his documentary crew. He's actually accusing one of them for working for the company, and he starts to hit him with some knee shots to the midsection, demanding for him to give him some answers. And that just kind of made me wonder, just in that little incident after the match, I do wonder how far they're going to take this whole Sami Zayn conspiracy theorist angle, whatever you want to call it. I mean, part of me wonders if they're going to, completely make Sami look like a complete lunatic by the time this thing's all said and done. Just completely losing his mind. It's just one thing I was kind of thinking about as this was going on. I really do want to know how far they do plan on taking this thing with Sami. But moving on here, we get a little quick segment with Carmella and Reginald backstage. she insists that they play a game called Who's the Snake? But the game doesn't last very long because Carmella quickly reveals Reginald is the snake, and she slaps the tray that he was holding out of his hand and tells him that he's fired. And initially, when this happened in the show, I thought that this might have been kind of a subtle way to get Reginald out of the picture because there really isn't too much of a need for him. And I've seen WWE do things similar to this in the past with just kind of getting people out of the picture quickly like this. So I thought this might have been what they were doing, but it actually wasn't the case at all. And we do figure out more about that a little bit later in the show. Moving on here, we get another one-on-one match, this one between Dominic and Chad Gable. And this is a rare matchup where Dominic has a size advantage, and just that alone got me curious. I actually looked it up, and Dominic's 6'2", 215. For some reason, I didn't think he was that big. That's definitely not a small guy by any means. And the main reason why I looked it up is because I was curious if there was any way he would be able to move down to that 205 live. Whatever they're doing there, I personally do not watch that. I don't think I've ever seen an episode of 205 live, but I was just kind of thinking about the guys that he might have, a better chance matching up against. And I'm not really sure how the rules work specifically with that weight. Like if you have to be around 205, you have to be no less than 205. I'm really not sure. I actually think, if I'm not mistaken, they did a little bit of an angle with Enzo whenever he was trying to get in the 205 live, where he had to, make his weight and try to lose some pounds or whatever it was. Basically, before he can go for that Cruiserweight Championship, he had to make weight. So I'm not sure if they do have a limit, but that was just one thing that kind of got me thinking. Dominic is definitely bigger than what I thought he was. I mean, especially considering who his dad is, not necessarily the biggest guy in the wrestling industry, but that really doesn't matter. Here in this match in particular, as far as Dominic goes, just strictly because he actually gets a one-on-one win, and a relatively clean win at that. He actually has a roll-up here, but I will say it wasn't just your ordinary roll-up just out of nowhere to just give somebody a protected win. Or a protected loss, sorry. This was actually the kind of roll-up that you don't mind seeing. And what I mean by that is, if you go back and watch this, there was a little bit of transition/reversal grappling stuff going on. So they were actually doing some wrestling stuff, and he maneuvered his way into positioning that roll-up. So if it happens like that, I'll accept it. Now, of course, you don't want to see it every single week. Still, that's completely out of the question as far as WWE doing that and people thinking that it's the right thing to do, although, nobody's saying that. I'm just saying that it's obviously not the right thing to do. So if you are going to use the roll-ups, this is the way to do it. Just try to keep it pretty, far and in between, because they are definitely overusing that for sure. But in this match, like I said, after Dominic gets the win, Rey Mysterio, that is, acts quickly after the match to get a little bit of revenge on Otis for hitting those frog splashes in back-to-back weeks. So he hits Otis with a senton onto the announce table and then makes a pretty fast escape backstage. So you can expect the whole Alpha Academy and Mysterio angle to continue on. I don't think it's going to get anywhere. Neither one of these tag teams are going to be in the tag team championship picture anytime soon. That's another thing that got me thinking. The tag team champions were not on the show tonight, that I noticed anyway. Of course, I might have missed it, but from what I remember, I do not recall seeing Ziggler and Rude. So once again, the tag team division is basically just treading water at this point, and that is really of no surprise to anybody. It seems like every single tag team division, whether it's the Raw tag team division, the SmackDown tag team division, or just the women's tag team division as a whole, just they can't seem to get going, and it's obviously one man's fault, the guy who's never really taken tag team wrestlers seriously, and that is Vince McMahon. So I don't really know if we can expect the tag team divisions to really feel legitimate until something, happens or changes, because, it's getting to the point now to where I feel almost hopeless. Just look at what happened this week with the women's tag team championships. Out of nowhere, they just, for some reason, they put two people who are supposed to be feuding, building up a program leading up to WrestleMania. They make them tag team partners 1 month before WrestleMania. That just makes absolutely no sense. It's another reason why Fastlane, just as a pay-per-view, really shouldn't be there. but it is. So WWE is forced to do stuff like this, although I feel like they could have done something. I mean, even Natalya mentioned something a little bit later. They have tag teams waiting. Like, well, what's up with the Riot Squad? Why not use them? You have Natalya and Tamina. I mean, I'm not too hot on that tag team, but I mean, it's better than putting Sasha and Bianca together, who are supposed to be going against each other. And I do imagine that probably at Fastlane is where things are really going to pick up in that rivalry. Something's got to happen, because if not, I mean, I just really don't know. They're kind of a little bit, I don't know, I feel like they're going a little bit too slow with this. I don't know. There's still about, 5 weeks left before Mania, so they do have time. But I don't know. I would have just done this a little bit differently personally had I been booking this, but, it is what it is. I'm still going to be optimistic because I do have high hopes for this match. Like I said, this is one of the ones that I am looking forward to out of all of the matches and potential matches that are going to be on the card. So as long as the match delivers, I'll be somewhat satisfied. But, I mean, they got to, really hit this out of the park as far as the pre-match promotion goes and just the build-up goes, because they really have something there with these two women if they actually do a little bit of digging and quit just putting them as a tag team, because that's just, I mean, I don't know. I really don't want to go too much further on that. Like I said, it's super late, but you guys know how I feel about that. It's just not the right thing to do, and I'm sure some of you agree. From what I can tell on the internet community, they were not very happy with it as well. So we will move on here to an interview backstage with Kayla Braxton and Seth Rollins. And there really wasn't too much I took away from this. I actually wasn't even going to mention it until something happened at the very end, and out of nowhere, Buddy Murphy actually walks up. And for some reason, he offers his help for the whole Cesaro situation. And Seth Rollins, without even looking at Murphy, just tells him to get out of his sight, which I thought was pretty weird, seeing Murphy walk up. At first, I was like, oh no, what are they doing here? But as I thought more about it, I mean, the thing that really killed the whole Buddy Murphy being the disciple was the Mysterios. I mean, everybody knows how badly that was done. But I do feel like there was too much damage with all that, everybody involved. So I was a little bit worried at first, and I really still don't know exactly what they're going to do with this. Murphy does have a match here with Cesaro a little bit later in the night, which we're going to get to, but I was just curious as to why he approached Seth in the first place. I mean, is he not dating Aaliyah anymore? They never really touched up on that. I'm not really asking them to, but I mean, it's just kind of weird that that was really the last time we see Murphy, and then he comes back and he's immediately involved with Seth again, or at least he's trying to be. I don't know. It was weird. Definitely something that I'm going to watch. I do want Buddy Murphy to be on the TV. I want him to be featured. But it just, I don't know. I mean, they just have a problem, I guess, with putting him with Seth Rollins. Or I don't know exactly what their deal is there. But we do get a little bit, like I said, more of Murphy and Cesaro a little bit later in the night. Right here, next, though, we get Bianca versus Shayna. A nice women's one-on-one match. A match that is, pretty good on paper. And I did notice one thing here. Of course, obviously, Sasha Banks comes out to, be in Bianca's corner for some reason. Nia Jax is out there as well, and, their pass cross. We'll get there a little bit. But one thing I was going to say, I did notice in this match, and I've actually noticed it in the past, but I didn't really ever mention it. Why do they put the pay-per-view logo every single instant replay that they show? Like on a regular SmackDown or a regular Raw, like for weeks leading up to Fastlane or Elimination Chamber, any pay-per-view that's coming up, they put the pay-per-view logo inside of the picture basically whenever they're showing an instant replay, and it just always kind of throws me off. I'm not really sure why. It seems like that's something that you should just do at the pay-per-view, like it's for the show itself. That might just be a little thing that I shouldn't even care about, but I don't know. It's one thing that I've noticed over the past, and I kind of wanted you guys to let me know if you guys noticed that as well. Just every time they show a replay leading up to whatever pay-per-view it is, you will see the pay-per-view logo inside of the replay box for weeks and weeks leading up to it, and I never really understood why they did that. But anyway, like I said, this match, Bianca and Shayna, hell of a matchup on paper, but for some reason, Bianca Belair actually handled Shayna pretty well. I was actually impressed considering the history that these two had down on NXT that the announcers actually alluded to. But when you look at these two, it's actually completely different styles. Shayna's more of a grappler slash submission specialist. Definitely don't want to butcher that one. Whereas Bianca has more of an unorthodox style that's centered more around, pure strength and athleticism. And the matchup itself, like I said, Bianca pretty much was in control of the majority of it. You could just tell that she is moving at a different speed. She's a lot stronger than Shayna, and that shows up in the finish of this match. But before the match does finish, like I alluded to a little bit earlier with Nia and Sasha being on the outside of the ring, they do have a little bit of a run-in when Nia runs into the SmackDown Women's Champion and puts her on her back. And while that chaos was going on outside of the ring, inside of the ring, Bianca is actually in the Karafuda clutch, and you don't really know if she's going to break out of it or not, but she actually transitions from the Karafuda clutch into a KOD to pick up the win, and that match is over. But after that match is over, if you did not watch it, you definitely should, strictly for the very end. And Sasha hits a very hard slap on Reginald. I mean, she cocks back and she just gets him. Sometimes the slaps aren't that great. Sometimes they are. It really depends on who's doing it. I know, just completely off topic, Shawn Michaels had a slap on Randy Orton way back in the day, and that's still to this day probably the best slap I've seen in WWE. But I'm not going to lie, Sasha Banks really connected when she got Reginald. So Reginald looks like he is having a pretty rough time right now. I mean, he got fired and then took one of the worst slaps I've seen in WWE in a pretty long time. So hopefully the night gets a little bit better for Reginald, and it might actually, because we do get a little bit more of him, surprisingly, later on in the show. But moving on here, we get the match I was talking about, Buddy Murphy versus Cesaro. And Seth Rollins comes out to the ring to get a better view and join the guys on commentary. But whenever I seen Buddy Murphy and Cesaro in the ring together, I really got excited, thinking that this was going to be or it at least had potential to be a damn good match. But Cesaro comes out of the gate strong here and really fast. But this match actually ends much, much quicker than I expected. And I actually noticed something during the ending of this match. Michael Cole called the ending before it actually happened. It was just a slight misunderstanding or a slight mistake. Something very easy. Just, you could tell that he thought that Murphy tapped out because Murphy hit the mat a couple times while Cesaro had him in the sharpshooter, although it was pretty obvious that he didn't tap out just yet. And Cole said, "Murphy taps, Cesaro with the win." But the ref hadn't stopped the match yet, and the bell didn't even ring. And it took about 4 seconds after Cole said that for Murphy to tap out. So that was just a small thing I noticed. I was curious if anybody else noticed that as well. It was just a rare mess up by Michael Cole. He really does not mess up very often. When you consider how long he's on the mic, what is it, 5 hours? Or no, not 5 hours anymore. It was 5 hours back whenever he was both the announcer or on the commentary team for both shows. But now, obviously, he's only 2 hours a week, but still, I mean, he's just as good as it gets. So those mess-ups by him are very rare, so you could let it slide whenever it happens. But moving on, we get a little bit more of Reginald. Like I said, he actually tries to knock on Sasha's door after she slapped the you-know-what out of him. And she answers, says no, and then slams the door in his face. And as he's walking away with his bags packed, and you're thinking, dang, we really might have seen the very end of Reginald here. He's actually approached by the women's tag team champions, who begin to insult him and try to pick a fight with him, until Nia Jax actually steps in and calls him cute. And that was just a little bit weird, but you can expect Nia and Shayna to use Reginald here just to basically help them successfully defend their titles at Fastlane, and then they're going to ditch him. And I'm just going to guess right now they're going to put him through a table or two in the process. And then, I don't know, Reginald will probably just get the James Ellsworth treatment and slowly be kind of worked out of the picture. At least that is what I expect. But moving on here, we get Apollo Crews. A little bit more of him, and he comes out to the ring speaking in a Nigerian accent. And he's joined by two quote-unquote Nigerian elite gods. And I did want to provide a little bit of audio for you here to let you guys know, for those of you who didn't get to watch this segment, or for those of you who just might have missed it. It's pretty cool to see. I mean, obviously we know how Apollo really talks, so this kind of has Kofi Kingston back in the early or the late 2000s with his Jamaican accent written all over it. But I will say that Apollo Crews does do this accent pretty well. I mean, I'm not really sure how much he's practiced it over the years, but I'll let you guys be the judge for it yourself.
Biggie, I know you're at home nursing your injury, and I know you fear what you have awoken inside of me. I see that you're coming back next week, which makes me very, very happy, because I'm no longer the man you once knew. I'm no longer the man you once dismissed. I no longer try to fit in. I proudly stand out. And I no longer beg, I demand. And I'm demanding for a rematch for your Intercontinental Championship. You will fall before my feet, and I will leave you a broken man for the rest of your life. And you will be haunted by my complete and total victory.
I mean, not bad. I gotta say, that was a pretty good accent by Apollo Crews there. I'm not going to lie. I watched the Black Panther probably like 4 times whenever that movie came out, so obviously that's what I was thinking of for a majority of this promo. That accent was just spot on in that movie, but I don't know. I like this. Just as far as the Big E versus Apollo Crews, it does have a little bit of juice to it. You can tell they're building it slowly, and like Apollo just said, Big E's expected back next week from his injuries that he was given to by Apollo Crews, so you can expect them to possibly have a match. We'll see, but I would not be surprised if Apollo Crews is the one to take this title off of Big E. He's had it for a little bit, and it was much awaited. Everybody wanted this singles run. Give him a championship. Let's see what he can do, and he's done a pretty good job. I mean, from the limited opportunities he's been given, he's only really had a couple guys he's gone against. I mean, Sami Zayn and Apollo Crews are the only two that really come to mind whenever you think of guys that Big E has fought under this current Intercontinental Championship reign. And Apollo Crews is just getting better and better every week in this character. So things usually, play out that way whenever the stars align like this, where a guy's starting to get really, really hot. And it wouldn't necessarily hurt Big E, I feel like, that much if he did lose to Apollo Crews. It just really depends on how he loses, I guess, because they can do it completely, give him the old-fashioned roll-up technique to where Big E really doesn't even get hurt at all by the loss, and then he eventually goes back. Like say that happens at Fastlane. They have a rematch at WrestleMania. Big E can regain the championship in front of fans, kind of do the same thing that they're kind of trying to do with Drew McIntyre, or what we think they might be trying to do with Drew McIntyre. So you can kind of pay attention to this program right here between Big E and Apollo Crews. It's one of the things about SmackDown that I really, really like, because obviously the main juicy entree, what you can say, is Roman Reigns versus Edge for the Universal Championship, the Daniel Bryan in the picture with Jey Uso kind of lingering around. That's the main thing. But whenever you have programs like this for your mid-card belts, like the Intercontinental Championship, where you got people invested every week, I really want to see what happens with Apollo Crews. Is Big E going to come back? How is this program going to keep developing and moving forward? That's really what makes SmackDown such a good show. So I am definitely looking forward to next week, Big E's return, to see what happens. I mean, I'm definitely intrigued by this new Apollo Crews, and you guys can let me know what you thought about his accent. I know that people are buzzing about it already, so you can just expect everybody to have their own opinion about that specific situation. But like I said earlier in the show about Natalya coming up and basically clamoring to Pierce and Sonya Deville about being left out of the tag team match at Fastlane, which, I mean, makes complete sense. But anyway, Pierce responds by saying that he's sorry and that's the match that was made, and he walks off. And this was actually the first and only appearance of Adam Pearce and Sonya Deville in this entire episode, and it came almost exactly an hour and a half. So, I mean, and the appearance itself only lasted like a mere 20 seconds, so not really a lot of Adam Pearce, and that's kind of surprising. It's just weird not to have them featured more, especially Adam Pearce. And I know he had something happen on NXT with William Regal, possibly like a heel turn from Adam Pearce. I don't know. So I was kind of surprised that he isn't really on SmackDown. SmackDown really used to be the show that Adam Pearce was on most. I know he's technically the authority figure or the WWE official for Raw and SmackDown, but he was really, really featured on SmackDown a lot more, obviously, whenever he was being harassed and bullied by Roman Reigns every week. So without that happening, I guess they don't really have a use for him other than just seems like being an a-hole to the women's tag team wrestlers. But anyway, moving on here, just a couple quick things. Jey Uso was attacked by Daniel Bryan backstage. It's actually kind of surprised me a little bit, considering that Daniel Bryan got the upper hand on their encounter earlier when he threw Daniel Bryan outside of the ring. I didn't expect him to be the one to attack Jey Uso backstage, but hey, I mean, if he's going to show a little bit of a mean side to him, I'm definitely not going to complain. And then we get a little bit of a ding-dong hello from Bayley, but it wasn't in the middle of the ring. It seemed like it might have been in that secondary ring they use backstage, usually with Kayla Braxton, when she has an interview with somebody, because I didn't notice any of the the virtual reality fans, I guess you can say. But this was quick. Nothing really happened in this specific ding-dong hello. She reads some sweet tweets, I guess is what she was going to try to read. She mentioned Sasha Banks in one of them. And then another one, she was going to read it, but it said something that I guess she really didn't want to read because she looks at one of the people that are behind the camera, starts to fuss at them a little bit, and then crumbles up the paper and then walks out of her little door there. So I really wasn't sure exactly what was going on there. Nothing was said about it. Maybe they'll answer it a little bit later, or I'm not really sure who's on Talking Smack, so I don't know. I mean, Bayley might be on there. If she's not, don't be mad at me. I had no idea. I didn't even see the preview that they usually do for it. So I'm not really sure who is going to be on it. Maybe she will, to kind of answer a little bit, or maybe give us a little bit more of an idea about what happened there. But last but not least, of course, I have to mess up at some point here, but last but not least, we get Jey Uso versus Daniel Bryan. And before this match starts, of course it's in the steel cage, by the way, but before this match starts, Corey Graves is in the ring and he's explaining the rules with like lights and kind of, he had like spotlights going around him. It was weird. They had people or cameramen up on the top of the cage showing camera angles to give you an idea of what the wrestlers see whenever they are attempting to climb the cage. And then, of course, Roman Reigns comes out to watch the match sitting in a chair outside of the ring. And this is the first cage match we've seen since Roman and KO on Christmas Day, I believe. I might be wrong. Of course, correct me if I am. But I do believe that this is the first one in about 8 or 9 weeks. So not really too bad to see a cage match, I guess. I mean, it's not for a championship or anything. I do think it was weird that Corey Graves had to explain the rules like that before the match. I really wasn't sure why. But I guess you never know. There might be already expecting to maybe get some new viewers from the whole Peacock thing. Maybe they're already expecting that some of them are watching if they do have cable. Maybe not. That could have been just a completely crazy thing to say, but you never know. I don't know. I just thought it was weird that Corey Graves decided to do that. They have never done that from what I can remember. But Daniel Bryan gets Jey Uso in the yes lock, and he has it locked in pretty good. And I'm only going to get to really the ending of this match because, I mean, it was a cage match. There's really not much I can talk about. These guys, they literally fought in the main event last week. So, I mean, if you want to watch a cage match, hey, I fully tell you, go watch this one. It was a pretty damn good match like you would expect from these two. But whenever you have the same two guys, like I've said, I mean, they've gone at it so many times on the main event, and there's only so much you can do. But it did kind of make me think about the first interaction that they had just way back whenever Jey Uso was finally just starting to do his little bit of a heel turn, whenever it was somewhat mutual respect between him and Daniel Bryan, and then they just had those brutal matches that were main event and SmackDown, where Jey Uso really got his first taste of main eventing was with Daniel Bryan, so it kind of makes sense that they continue to go to that well. And I mean, I don't really blame them. Like I said, they have good matches, but this one in particular, like I said, Daniel Bryan gets Jey Uso in the yes lock, and he has it locked in pretty good. Jey squirms to the ropes and manages to grab the bottom rope, but like there's no rope break or a disqualification in a cage match, so Uso has no choice but to tap out and award Daniel Bryan a number one contenders match, or a Universal Championship match. It awards him being the number one contender for a Universal Championship match at Fastlane. And I'm pretty excited about that one. I don't expect Daniel Bryan to win at all. There's no way they're going to have Roman Reigns, as hot as he is, drop the title this close to WrestleMania. So it is what it is there. Although Daniel Bryan, of course, is definitely going to make things interesting. He's going to have you believing at some point in the match that he might be able to win. But ultimately, he probably will not get the job done. But hey, the jury is still out. You never know. WWE could try to swerve us, but let's just all hope that is not the case. And we will just go ahead and get Edge versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. So let's just hope that that is exactly what happens. But there you go, guys. That was the SmackDown review portion of the show. I hope that you enjoyed it. I tried to give you a pretty, in-depth review. This SmackDown itself, though, kind of flew by. It seems like they're starting to fly by a lot lately. I don't know. They're kind of anytime there's long matches, like the cage match was pretty long. So I feel like, and then obviously the whole tag team being broken down into 2 back-to-back singles matches. And then, of course, the Chad Gable versus Dominic match. So there was a lot of wrestling on the show tonight, and I'm not complaining about that. I always prefer there to be more wrestling than other stuff. It's just a lot more fun to watch. So, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the SmackDown review portion of the show. And now it's time to get right into the top 5 Mount Rushmores. All right, guys, here we go. A top 5 for you. And this one's going to be the top 5 Mount Rushmores. And what does that mean? I'm sure most of you guys know. Obviously, like if somebody says the Mount Rushmore of the quarterback position, it's going to be like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, John Elway, whoever. I'm not saying that's my list, but I'm just saying, 4 quarterbacks, whatever. You guys basically know that's what it is. But this in particular list right here, how are you going to have 5 Mount Rushmores in wrestling? Well, I'm basically doing it somewhat territorial based and basically like regional, kind of like where you're from. And to be completely honest here, the main reason why I wanted to do something like this in the first place was really to show you guys just how stacked the state of Texas is, and just is a complete wrestling factory if you're talking about Hall of Famers and just, legends in the wrestling ring. And obviously I'm trying not to be too biased. That is the state I'm from, the state I'm in right now. I've lived in Texas my entire life, so I definitely know, or I've heard about all the, famous wrestlers who have come from here. And I'm going to give some shout outs to some other areas too to make sure that, I pay some respect and give credit where it's due here. So like I said, this is going to be basically territorial based. So I already gave one away. One of them is going to be Texas. So there's going to be some others, and they're not necessarily all quote-unquote territorial or regional based. Some of them are a little bit different. For instance, number 5 here, I'm going to go ahead and get right into, and that is the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestlers. And basically what I do here quickly before I get into the women's wrestlers is I made these Mount Rushmores. I listed them out, all 5 of them, and then I basically ranked them. I listed out the 5 that I wanted to do in no particular order, just the wrestlers that were there. And then I basically ranked those 5 groups of wrestlers as a whole. Like, how do the groups of wrestlers as a whole stack up against the next one? For instance, like, how does the Mount Rushmore of Texas wrestlers stack up against the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestlers, for instance? I hope you guys know what I'm trying to say here. If not, hopefully throughout the top 5, you will kind of understand what I'm doing here. But anyway, number 5 here will be the top 5 women, or the women's wrestling Mount Rushmore. And in this one, I have Trish Stratus, Lita, Chyna, and Charlotte. And this one was probably the easiest one to do. Obviously, you can only pick 4. The first 2 that I mentioned were no-brainers. Chyna, obviously a no-brainer. And then Charlotte, I feel like whenever it's all said and done, may be the greatest of all time whenever you are talking about her accomplishments and her accolades. So you just have to put her in there. She is actually she's one of the few current wrestlers who are still wrestling today that are on one of these Mount Rushmore. So I had to definitely mention Charlotte with the legends. An honorable mention I'll say on the women is Mae Young, just because, her name's mentioned with, I don't know if they do the Mae Young tournament or whatever it is on NXT, or maybe it's something else. But basically, for her to make a name for herself and be as famous as she was in an era where there really weren't any women involved in the wrestling industry at all, and then still be featured so old, or whenever she was super, super old, really, really late in her life, she was, still making appearances on Raw. And she took some bumps. I'm not going to lie. When she was already very up there in age, she was taking some hard bumps that I probably couldn't even take at any point in my life. So definitely kudos and respect to Mae Young there. So number 5 was the women's wrestlers Mount Rushmore. And we're going to move on here to the next one. And this is the one that I might actually get the most bite back, or whatever you want to say, on Twitter or wherever. This is the one that people might not agree with me on. Because just being completely transparent, I don't really pay attention to wrestling outside of WWE very much. AEW is the most that I do, and that's still pretty rare. The only reason why I do is because of the names that I'm familiar with, and just to kind of see, what's going on. You always want to peek and know what's going on over there if you're a wrestling fan, so that definitely has a little bit to do with it. But I made this one the Mount Rushmore of quote-unquote outsiders, like people who made a name for themselves outside of WWE, but eventually made it to WWE. And the reason why I think that this is going to be the one that I get a lot of, disagreements on is because I'm not too familiar with the independent scene and New Japan and all those other wrestling promotions out there, where you or anyone else who's listening right here might be a lot more familiar with me. You say, hey, why didn't you put this guy on here? This dude's way better. Dude, you don't even know what you're talking about. Well, I will admit, on this particular one, I used only wrestlers who made their way to WWE, but obviously made or established themselves as, a pretty solidified wrestler outside of WWE. So here on the Mount Rushmore for the outsiders, I have AJ Styles, Shinsuke Nakamura, Daniel Bryan, and Samoa Joe, with an honorable mention being Adam Cole, only because I was introduced to him very, very late, but it seems like he has a huge fan base outside of the WWE and also inside the WWE, so he must be super, super popular. But with myself, I had to put Samoa Joe on here instead, just because I do remember him back in his TNA days, feuding with AJ Styles, being the top heel over there in TNA, and then being what he was here whenever he came to WWE. He's currently on the commentary team for Raw, and I just feel like he's being completely misused. I feel like at some point you have to try to throw him in there with Roman Reigns and hopefully both Usos as that Samoan heel faction. They've never really gone all in on that, and I just hope that they do. Samoa Joe, that could be the thing that he needs to reestablish himself, and you can't tell me that after about a year being together, booking Roman Reigns versus Samoa Joe for the Universal Championship wouldn't absolutely be box office. So, and then obviously the other guys kind of speak for themselves. Shinsuke Nakamura, Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, they're just complete legends. I had to get them on here at number 4. So moving on here to number 3, and this one was a little bit tricky. There was one guy I wanted to put on here, but for obvious reasons I could not, and this is the Mount Rushmore of Canadian wrestlers, the guys who are from Canada. So, and this one, there's actually, Canada is no slouch when it comes to producing wrestlers. They are a literal factory. They have, look at the Hart Dungeon. That resides in Canada, and there's much, much more so. Chris Jericho, Bret Hart, Edge, and surprisingly here, I put Kevin Owens. And that's one because of the impact, and I'm looking at the big picture, and I did factor in potential. What he might be 10, 15 years from now, he might be remembered as one of the best Canadian wrestlers. And the one guy I didn't put on here was Chris Benoit. Had things not happened the way they did, he without a doubt would be worthy of this because he's just truly one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time. But whenever you're speaking about Mount Rushmore, you cannot put somebody like that on there because it is simply the greatest of greats. So I have no problem putting Kevin Owens in the place of that and having this be a pretty solid number 3 list. Like I said, Bret Hart, Chris Jericho, those are 2 Hall of Famers right there. Edge, obviously a Hall of Famer. Kevin Owens, probably a future Hall of Famer if you're asking me. So a pretty good team right there that stacks up with, almost all of the rest of the Mount Rushmores here. So I will continue on to the number 2 Mount Rushmore, and that is just basically the United States as a whole. Like basically what I'm trying to say here, because obviously number 1 is going to be Texas. I'll just give that away right now. What I'm trying to say here is that simply Texas as just their own state, their number 4 could probably beat an all-star team from the rest of the United States. Like literally, if you take 4 wrestlers from Texas, which I'm going to tell you which 4 those are, and you put them against 4 all-stars from literally everybody else on the country, and they would probably still have a hard time beating the team. But I will say that I put USA, just the USA Mount Rushmore is Kurt Angle, Triple H, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair. An honorable mention was The Rock. The only reason why I didn't put The Rock on here is because I really wasn't sure. Obviously he's American. I know that. He speaks perfect English. He's clearly an American, but I just wasn't sure because whenever I was Googling more Canadian wrestlers, The Rock's name actually popped up. And I was like, what? I actually had no idea. I'm not sure how legit that is, but I didn't want to put him on the American team and have somebody say, dude, what are you talking about? He's from Canada, you idiot, or whatever, So not that any of you guys do that, but I'm just saying, I didn't want to seem like a doofus on here by putting The Rock on the wrong team. So I just went ahead and left him as an honorable mention. Could not leave him off completely, but the names that stick out here are guys like Kurt Angle, Ric Flair in his prime, Triple H. I do feel like they probably wouldn't end up beating this Texas team, but man, they would probably come very, very close. So without further ado, I will go ahead and reveal the Mount Rushmore of Texas wrestlers. And like I've hinted at throughout this entire top 5, this one is absolutely stacked. So I'll just go ahead and spit them out real quick, and that is Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Eddie Guerrero. I mean, need I say anything else? Those 4 alone. Undertaker, the greatest WWE/WWF wrestler of all time, arguably the best character of all time. So him being on there alone is just, makes the list legit in of itself. And then Stone Cold Steve Austin, the most popular wrestler of all time, the most over wrestler of all time, still to this day. He's just a generation of fans still to this day are in love with the Stone Cold Steve Austin character and the impact it had on their life. You look at Shawn Michaels, one of the best in-ring wrestlers of all time. A lot of people think he is the greatest of all time. The showstopper. It's very hard to believe he didn't have more championship reigns, but he had some Royal Rumble wins, a lot of memorable moments, a lot of memorable matches in the WWE. So you definitely got to keep him on there. And then the late great Eddie Guerrero. I mean, I don't even have to say anything about him. He is probably the most beloved wrestler in WWE. He just hits a complete demographic of the fan base. I mean, here in Texas, being so close to Mexico, there are a lot of Hispanics here. And I know me growing up with a lot of Hispanic friends, I knew that Eddie Guerrero was just super, super popular among people my age. So it's probably just like that. And obviously he is from El Paso, Texas. So he is from Texas for anybody who might be questioning that. But no question here for me who the number 1 Mount Rushmore is. I hope that you guys understood what I was trying to say, and this wasn't super, super confusing, because it was kind of difficult to explain, although I'm sure that you guys know what I'm talking about. But there you go, guys. That was the top 5 Mount Rushmores. I hope that you guys enjoyed that one. I'm going to have another one for you next week. I think I'm going to do the top 5 factions, just to let you guys know there. So it's a little bit more simple than this one, but I will definitely get to enjoy doing that. Factions are one of my favorite things, and kind of just in a little bit of a shout out to the Hurt Business for how good they're doing right now. Might as well do a little bit of top 5 action and show some love to the factions from all over the WWE timeline. So there you guys have it. That should just about do it for me here on this edition of the SmackDown review. I certainly enjoy doing it for you. I'm surprisingly not too tired, given that it's 3:22 a.m. I figured I would be dragging through at this point and just struggling to, get words out and make it understandable for you guys. So I hope that I was able to do that and provide a good episode for you guys. And I hope that you guys all have a great weekend. I hope you guys all have a great week. Walk passionately in the direction of your dreams, and let's make it happen, guys. I'll talk to you next time.